I'd like to welcome back Klym for a part two because we had so much to talk about on the state of Ukraine, what it's like to be there during the war. So welcome back, Klym. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Well, where we left off, we really wanted to dive a little deeper into what it was like in those early days of the war. Can you kind of rewind and go back and really share with us what it was like that first year? What was the hardest thing about living in the capital city, Kyiv, or anywhere, particularly for you, and you're in the capital city of Kyiv?
Well, actually, the hardest thing is during the first years of the war was that it is already the third year of the war. At that time, we were thinking just it would be good to last another day, another night, another week, another month. And if somebody told us that it will continue for 3 years and might continue even further, it will be very hard. It would be very hard for us. I don't know if we could stand it. At that time, we were just on adrenaline and thinking that we will last a couple of months. Russians will understand that they cannot conquer us. Another help will come. Maybe European countries will make some arrangements, put sanctions or anything, and it will all stop. But it continued. It went on and on, and psychologically, emotionally, it's people are more exhausted right now during the third year of the war than they were at that time. But if to say what is another thing which is very emotional hard, is probably to see the results of Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities. They do conduct them during all this period, with long distance missiles or drones. Later they use drones, and they are sometimes they are shot down, sometimes they are not very precise, and they hit residential buildings where a lot of people live. And probably the most distressed thing is to wake up in the morning and to read news, or to read news. What are the other city what is the other city which was hurt? What is the other building which was destroyed fully? And to see how people how emergency dig out the wreckage to find if some people are alive under this wreckage.
Yeah, this was a great book that really documented that experience in Kharkiv. I read through this recently, and it really documented the day-to-day experience that those people were going through in that city. What was to just look at Kyiv itself, though, was Kyiv in any danger at any point in the early days? I have another client in Kyiv, and he had talked about debris hitting his building and a nearby building being blown up and fires, and there were those immediate attacks in the early weeks of the war. Did you feel like you were in danger at any point?
Yeah, definitely. It's just that what helped me to keep myself together, to hold myself, is I was concentrating on the job which I was doing at the time, quite important, and also on this volunteer job for city protection, and it allowed me to stay conscious, I would say. But when Russians were close in the outskirts of Kiev, it was shells were falling back and forth, flying back and forth, and they conducted a lot of attacks via missiles in the points which they considered military targets, but in many points it was not nothing related to military. targets, sometimes again residential buildings, trade centers, or something else. At that time, about a month when they were in outskirts of Kyiv, they were trying to surround the city to cut it from any supplies, to make a seizure, and our forces were trying not to allow this to do that. But at some point, they almost did it from at least three directions out of 4 directions, and there was just a couple of roads where supplies could be brought, and for example, food started to disappear in shops, in supermarkets, and it was a bit scary because I was afraid that they will seize the city fully, and then some terrible things can start. How it happened in Mariupol, for example. Mariupol was the city very close to Russian border, and they managed to surround it just during the first days of the invasion. And then there was a garrison there of Ukrainian forces, and they tried to defeat it somehow. They started to destroy the city with bombs, with air bombs, with shells, with everything that they had, without letting civilians out. And it was a humanitarian catastrophe. There is a very good documentary film which recently received Oscar, which is called 20 Days in Mariupol, conducted by journalists that were at the time there in this city, and they filmed, let's say, first stage of this seizure. Then they managed to
it's a brutal film. Yeah.
Very brutal film. I didn't see it because it's very hard for me to watch it again. I was watching it during the period when it was happening, from the videos from the people who were there, and it's the issue is that it's not even the worst that happened in this film. The worst began after these journalists left the city, because at that time nobody was already able to help civilians. Doctors either fled or were exhausted. Hospitals were ruined. Police and everything that didn't work, and just very aggressive Russians who conquered the city. They entered the city and conducted something which is similar what they did in outskirts of Kyiv when they were here. And at that time, actually, during the first days, which is very, very strange, Russians seem to be like this. Russians considered to be civilized, but when their army took outskirts of Kyiv, they met some resistance. They just set machine guns in intersections of the small town and started to shoot in any cars that were there, killing a lot of civilians. There were a lot of investigations later with road cameras and all over this all this stuff, which allowed to track exactly who in the Russian military is responsible for this. They looted stuff from the houses. They when they understood that they have to spend some time there, they started to prosecute some people who could be considered as pro-Ukrainian people, who could be considered a danger to them, and they just massacred them without any legal procedures or anything. When they left when they left the outskirts of Kyiv, about 500, 600 people were found in the massive grave that and all over the streets and in basements and everywhere where they standed. I was there when they left as a volunteer, helping to clean some wreckage in the streets. There was like a massive move. People just went trying to help those who left there. And it was quite I cannot find the words. The good thing is that outskirts of Kyiv are now repaired significantly, very actively. There is like a small town which is probably very famous, Irpin. The fights took place exactly in the Irpin, and so significant part of the city of this town is destroyed because the fights were just in the streets of this town. And now there is a lot of restoration going on there. With the help, with the international aid, a lot of countries try to donate to help to restore these buildings, residential houses, and so on, and public buildings and so on.
And they've won back some territory, right? They've taken back some places that were invaded.
Yeah, we
It's
took
gone
back.
back and forth, right? Now the past 3 years.
Not back and forth. We took
Yeah.
some territories back, significant territories in Kharkiv, in eastern part near Kyiv, and in Kherson a little bit later, like in half a year. But now Russia occupies significant part of territories, and they don't allow some international organizations to come there. And United Nations talking to people who migrated from these territories, who went out, they say that there are a lot of human rights violations on these territories reported by these people. So what the Russians do there, probably something similar, which they conducted in this outskirts of Kyiv, which we saw.
Yeah, there were a lot of barbaric reports and a
Absolutely.
lot of associations, organizations have deemed this as war crimes, right? I mean, Putin is now
Absolutely.
a wanted war criminal from most countries in the world.
At some point, there were funny cases, like Russians were so surprised with usual stuff which Ukrainians have in their houses, in their flats. Well, in Kyiv region, people are a little bit more wealthier than in other parts of Ukraine, as in many countries. And Russians were in some deep regional villages or something like this, and they were stealing a lot of stuff. And there are
What kinds of
records.
things were they surprised about? These things they've never seen before?
Just a lot of things that they never seen. For example, there were records of telephone calls from Russians to back to their families, and many Russians have said, "Oh, these Ukrainians, they have so many sneakers here. I will take something for my daughter." And the wife is saying, "Yeah, take some, and don't forget to take a computer because she needs a computer to study." And once there was a video report from Russian some town, and the woman was complaining that her husband died in Ukraine in the war, and she was complaining on the background of the fridge, which had a advertisement from Ukraine, so it was saying in Ukraine something in Ukrainian. And it became obvious that this fridge was taken and brought back from Ukraine. And actually, when they were leaving, they took a lot of stuff, like even carpets. We saw carpets on their armored vehicles, which they were looting. Many of them
washing machines and
washing machines. Yeah. Actually, they liked all these home appliances very,
different
very much.
appliances. Yeah, that's strange.
So when we are talking that Russia is so great and powerful, but the people are living such miserable lives that they are going to another country, risk their lives to loot some water machine, wash machine.
Yeah, that's wild. Wow. Sure.
Yeah, and so now the front line has stabilized a bit, and most of the fights are going in a very long but thin front line. But Russians continue for these 2 years. They continue to make a long distance strikes over Ukrainian infrastructure and cities and so on. That's why it's not very safe in most of the places in Ukraine, except for some regions very far in the west. So yeah, everybody is risking their lives, and people going to sleep. They understand that there can be like a terrorist attack. You cannot name it otherwise, because when you are sending dozens of drones somewhere on a large city, some of them will fall on residential
In the
buildings,
middle of the night, right? That's, I mean, that's
and they are
terrible.
doing this at night. Yeah, so people are, the only thing that people can do is hide behind in corridors behind a couple of walls, so not to have these injuries. But if the drone hits the building, it usually destroys a couple of flats at least, but it can also destroy the whole building. If some buildings are not very strong to manage the strike.
Now in Kyiv, I
Sometimes.
understand there were alarms that would go off. Are these still going off? Do you still deal with this
Yeah, absolutely.
every
Every
day? Is there an alarm
Not
that's
every day, but
okay?
first they try to strike more quite intensively, but then, as we understand, they had some lack of missiles, so they tried. There are some periods when they accumulate missiles and then they strike. For example, massive strike was during New Year, in some days near New Year. And massive strikes on Kyiv was just a couple of days ago when 35 missiles came exactly in Kyiv. But Kyiv is more or less fine because it is well protected. Patriot systems, which was provided by our partners, they are very efficient, and we can say that they target what they want. Still, the wreckage falls on the town, on the city when the missiles are shot down, but they don't cause such much trouble. But anyway, there is still a lot of troubles. Cars are burnt, windows are broken.
Even
Two
even
years
in
ago,
Kyiv?
2 days ago. Hmm?
Even
Yeah,
in Kyiv.
in
Okay.
Kiev, yeah.
Yeah.
Just 2 days ago, nobody was hurt. It seemed to me, but they fired up a storage of a large retail company, uh, and created a huge crater somewhere in the middle of the street, burning up cars which were parked not far away. Yeah, so it's still quite dangerous, but it is nothing compared to what people experience in Kharkiv, for example, city, or somewhere in eastern cities which are very close to the border, to the front line. There, if Russians can shell them from cannons, then it is totally miserable for the citizens. Kharkiv is very close to Ukrainian border, or to Russian border, like 40 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. And it is under constant shelling, and it's 1.5 million city. It was a large industrial and educational center. A lot of international students studied there. Now it's all moved either west to the west or subdued significantly, and they continue. And it's very short time between the alarm and the missile coming. It could be just 1 minute, for example. You cannot hide during this time, and they continue, go on and go on. And just recently they repeated the attack on uh, electrical infrastructure. Yes, just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And the city is out of power for another day already, almost fully. It's very hard to protect this city. Other cities, other smaller towns where the front line came slowly into our direction, they were almost erased with Russian bombs because they don't know other way to proceed, and if there is Ukrainians are making resistance in this town, in this city, they just erase it with bombs, with shells and missiles. So there are a lot of cities that are significantly damaged, which are or were near the front line.
Well, what with all of this psychological stress and physical danger, what keeps people going? What keeps you personally going?
Well, hard to generalize because for different people it's different motives. Probably a lot of people would like just to have Russians retreat from the country, to liberate these territories, to win in this war. Regarding me, what drives me, except for usual stuff that drives people like a good job and ability to see beloved and family. Well, probably I could do it somewhere abroad in safe place, like many Ukrainians did, which migrated to EU. But I think it would be like a retreat, personal retreat. And I don't want to be a refugee in some other country. I just want to live in my own country, to be Ukrainian, and to contribute to the process of its transformation from old Soviet type colony to modern European free country. And yeah, this drives me. Yeah, at this moment, some hordes of orcs, like we call them here, they stand in our way on this path. But Ukrainians show that you can oppose Russians. That though Russian army was considered the second power in the world, it appeared to be not so powerful, you know. And yeah, Ukrainians show that we can oppose this. It can be resisted, and it can even be overcome. It can be. We can win at some points. That's why
I do. I
I'm
mean,
just
from talking to a lot of different people there, I do get the sense that there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of faith that this will work out. People are really determined to stick this out and win it.
yeah. People mostly believe that they can and will win this war. It's just not very clear when it will happen. But nobody, well, most of the people are not going to surrender.
And that says a lot about the Ukrainian people. It says a lot about your culture, that you're determined and you really stick with it and you're loyal to the country. Could you tell us a little bit about the Ukrainian culture and what that identity is like?
Well, this is quite a good question. What I wanted to mention, as I understand, it was not much known about Ukrainians before this invasion, probably. And as I talked earlier to different cultures, they often mixed us with Russians. They thought that we are like some kind of Russians, but due to some deviations, we live in different countries. But this is not true. The first thing that you should know about Ukrainians is that we are not Russians.
That's good.
And
Yeah, yeah.
so we have our own like language. We have our own language and quite a long history. Yeah, part of this history is related to Russian Empire. We spent a couple of centuries in Russian Empire, but even and that's why we have many things in common, because when you live in one country, definitely there is some mix of cultural things. But what I think distinguishes us significantly from Russians is the attitude to governance. We are much more democratic than Russians. Like in Ukraine, people usually don't trust government, and as soon as they elect somebody, they started to criticize him very soon. and try to elect somebody else much better in a short time, well, in proper time. Historically, Ukrainian path is like confrontation with free people which confront some empires that would like to conquer them. At some points we were successful, at others not so successful, and actually there were a couple of attempts to declare independence of Ukraine earlier, 100 years ago at least, but it failed because communist Russia was much more powerful. At this time, I think we have much more chances to stand our ground and protect our independence and our way of life. So what I wanted to say, Ukrainians are much more democratic. They like to know others' opinions and to elect for something in many cases when it is not even needed. Like if there is I don't know, some decision in a small group, then everybody's opinions should be known and voted for it.
And that's probably just another reason why Russia doesn't like you is, right? It's like
Yeah, definitely,
you're
because
more like the rest of Europe.
we are a very bad example for them, because we are the only country, probably one, almost except for Baltic countries, we are the only country that preserved democracy after the collapse of Soviet, not preserved democracy, but which developed democracy after collapse of Soviet Union. All other countries, except Baltic countries, 3 Baltic countries, and maybe Georgia a little bit, they are authoritarian countries, and they just follow Russia in all the international policy and in their internal policy. So we are somehow very distinguishable from them from this perspective. Yeah, our judicial system is not as perfect as British, for example, but not many countries actually can say this that they are so perfect. We are trying to develop our democracy. We are trying to work on the flaws in our system, and Ukraine has changed significantly actually.
I think that's all important to know because I think a lot of I'm from originally from New York and I live in North Carolina now, but and I'm more educated than a lot of other people, and I still didn't really know what Ukraine was. I knew before the war because I was fortunate to meet you and some others on in my journey as a business communications coach. But before that, really, honestly, I didn't really know where I didn't. We're not really taught our geography really well in American schools. It's something we need to work on. We don't really learn about other cultures as good as we should be doing, and even references to the boxing brothers. I thought they were Russian. People said they were Russian. That so even the identities are mixed up. The geographic location is unknown to a lot of Americans, and it's just such a foreign thing that nobody really knows. But I mean, you're right. You're right next door to Poland, right? So Poland is one of your major neighbors. How have they played in a role in this whole war? Have they been helpful in certain ways?
I will comment on the initial statement that you mixed Ukrainian brothers,
Oh
boxing
yeah, yeah.
brothers.
He's the boxer
Actually,
of he's
this is
the
quite
mayor
often,
of the city,
quite
right?
often, and a lot of things that people in those things that think that they are Russian, they are from Russian Empire or Soviet Union, they were created by Ukrainians actually. And for example, Soviet achievements in space, they were grounded on the engineers from Ukraine, Rodolph and Glushko, actually.
Wow,
Very
really?
powerful
Is that
students.
right?
Yeah, so a lot of cultural achievements are also from people who were born in Ukraine or who were Ukrainians. For example, you probably know this marine artist Aivazovsky. Everybody acknowledged him as Russian, but he was born in Ukraine and he's Armenian ethnically, and he lived most of his life in the Crimea. For example, another good example is this avant-garde movement in early 20th century. It was also grounded on a lot of Ukrainians. Malevich, for example, he was born also in Kyiv. He's ethnically Poland, but everybody considers him as Russian, for example, which is strange.
Wow. Yeah.
Kandinsky spent a significant part of his life in Odessa, and he studied and formed his personality in Ukraine, part of Russia at the time, part of Russian Empire. And there are many examples of this. Gogol, very considered sometimes as a Russian writer, but he was born in Ukraine, and he started to write about. He started with writing Ukrainian stories for Russian audience, and that's why he's considered like a Russian. Sometimes he considered as a Russian writer, but I, for example, consider him as Ukrainian.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
there
yeah,
are a
like
lot of
really trying to
examples.
form that identity and break away from the Russian.
Yeah, I think we should distinguish somehow this legacy and
Yeah.
understand not everything is acknowledged to Russian Empire, though it was done during the times of Russian Empire. Maybe I think we could achieve even more if we weren't in Russian Empire at that time. If you want to learn about Ukrainian history, which is very interesting actually, and difficult, it's even more twisted than Game of Thrones, you know. You can check out this American historian Timothy Snyder. He has a very nice lectures about history of Ukraine, how it interacted with all these neighbors, with Poland, with how it is related to Vikings, how it is related to Ottoman Empire, to Byzantine and the Orthodox Church there, and how Russia influenced all this.
Is this Timothy
Yeah,
Snyder is his name?
Timothy Snyder, right. He has some books about Ukraine. He has also a set of lectures which he conducts in Yale, if I'm not mistaken. Coming to Poland, yeah, though we had some conflicts earlier, many centuries ago, confrontation, they appear to be one of the best neighbors, helpers in this story. They allowed, invited a lot of refugees stayed in Poland. They provide a lot of weapons to us. They advocates our position in European Union. It's not only because they're so kind, it's also because they understand that they will be next if we fall. And actually, most of the Eastern European countries, like Baltic countries, Poland, Romania, also Slovakia, they at some points they were very helpful because they understand that they are in danger also, much more danger than France, for example, Germany.
Sure, it's much closer. Yeah, I have a client in Lithuania who she keeps a suitcase in her trunk, ready to go. At the trunk of her car, she keeps a suitcase in there. For the whole first year, she talked about the whole first year of the war. She talked about that possibility of an invasion there, and she was scared. She was ready to get in her car and head to the border if she needed to.
Yeah,
So people are
that's
thinking
true.
about that in other countries too.
That's true. Though these Baltic countries, Estonia and Lithuania, they are like in NATO, but they are in outskirts of NATO. It will be very hard for NATO to protect them. Yeah, that's why they were also at some point part of like Russian Empire, Soviet Empire, and that's why they are staying very alert. The good thing is that Western European leaders are also understanding the threat now, which is coming from Russia, and they start at least talk more and more about this, that industry has to be prepared for a larger war, that military forces has to be trained, and so on and so on. The best way would be to provide more help to Ukraine at this point. Unfortunately, this is going very slowly. I think it could be better.
Yeah, and with international media is not always there to document everything, report everything, and educate us the way that maybe as good as it should be. But so because of that, I think are there things that Americans should know about Ukraine? I mean, we can obviously go and learn, like you said, Timothy Snyder. We could look up the historians and learn about the history there. Is there anything else we should focus on?
Yeah, I think first you should try to understand Ukraine better, not from the perspective of from the perspective of part of Russian Empire or Russian culture, but as a separate part. Actually, Timothy Snyder does a very great job on this, distinguishing it. And regarding current moment, I think you should understand that if we fall, you fall. It's not very obvious, maybe at the beginning, but it's this war is confrontation between autocracies and democratic regimes, and a lot of countries now are monitoring the situation and how democracies will react on this. And US somehow guaranteed protection to Ukraine, and not only US, with this Budapest memorandum when Ukraine get rid of nuclear weapons. It was only memorandum, and well, maybe not very clearly specified, but anyway, there are some guarantees in it for Ukrainian safety. Now, US stepped in to provide support during this war. So, if this support falls, then everybody who is monitoring the situation from the backstage, they will see that European countries and America are weak, that democracies can be challenged. And it's not only about Russia. A lot of countries, a lot of autocracies would like to change the current state of international order, I would say. And China is watching the situation closely. Iran is watching the situation. North Korea is watching the situation and actually closely collaborate with Russia. That's why it's very important to ease this conflict here and as fast as possible, because as long as it continues, first, Russia is getting on military rails, their economy and their mindset more and more. And second, the whole world considers this as the war mode as a new reality, new normality. That's why another conflict can arise quite easy. I think that the thing that Ukraine resists so successfully during first years probably delayed the war between China and Taiwan, the invasion of Taiwan. But now China probably will take the consider all the mistakes that Russia did and maybe reconsider their own military plans and just try to do it in a different way. Maybe not a direct invasion, but some blockade or some indirect war or something more sophisticated. They can use proxies, for example, like North Korea, to
Yeah, that's true.
create challenges in that region. And America is definitely is very well-grounded country because of its own economy, because of its own industry and cleverness of people and so on. But American prosper is also grounded on international order that was built after the World War II. This free trade, international rules, ability to project its power where it is needed. If everybody in the world understands that America is not actually great but is weak, that it cannot support its own allies, then they will have good motivation to challenge it to challenge you in other
Lots of
places,
other ways. Yeah.
lots of other ways. And I was very surprised seeing that Republicans are somehow delaying this so needed aid now, because they were always considered as hawks in international politics, you know. And
Yeah.
now they are concentrating on these problems of migration and unemployment or something like this. Definitely, where is greatness in this? You know, if if these problems, if unemployment and migration are the crucial things, then probably Switzerland is the most great country in the world, because it doesn't have any problems with this. So I think Americans should be more confident and more active in their actions.
I think that's a great place to leave it. There's so many more things to talk about and get into. I think we have you back again some other time soon for some
Yeah,
updates.
no problem.
Make this
If
a
I
common
survive
habit.
another, if I survive another Russian attack, then no problem. I will be glad
Oh
to
no.
talk to you.
Well, let's hope for the I always hope for the best for you. And yeah, let's check back soon, have you come back, and we'll get back into those other things. Give us an update. In the meantime, stay safe in Ukraine. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing this and really coming in to spend your time and document this. I hope this gets out to people and they get to hear the message and learn a little bit more about your country.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. It was a pleasure for me to share my view, my thoughts, to share some information about Ukraine. And see you later. And take care.
Thanks, Klym. We'll talk again soon. Bye now.